Uh-oh, someone's teasing the Snyderverse again. Can you guess who? Well, as our good friends at Comic Book News shows us, yes, it's Zack Snyder. So here's the post that he put on Instagram of Henry Cavill as Superman. So he stirred up DC fans on social media after posting a black and white image of Henry Cavill as Superman from Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, writing, Henry Cavill is Superman from BVS, shot with my monochrome 50mm Noctilux 3 weeks on Instagram. 3 weeks. So he's only been on Instagram for 3 weeks now? I thought he'd been on there. Well, all right. Oh, so maybe that's all it is, you know? He's just, hey, look, here's this cool shot that I did. Yeah. Well, coincidence? Let's see. The photo arrives at a time when the future of DC Studios and Warner Brothers Discovery is in flux, and fans are once again wondering if Snyder is hinting at something bigger. So while the post celebrates Cavill's iconic portrayal, James Gunn's Superman movie stars David Cornsweet as the new Man of Steel. Gunn's reboot marked a new start for the DC universe, setting the tone for his so-called Superman family era. Snyder's post, however, feels like a reminder of the old guard, and a quiet response to fans who continue to voice disappointment over Gunn's creative direction. Snyder's timing wasn't random. What do you mean? His Cavill post follows growing backlash to Gunn's DCEU and frustration among fans who feel disconnected from the franchise's new tone. We've already been told that James Gunn will be out as head of DC Studios, and the impact likely will be felt all the way down to DC Comics. Oh, no. Now, this is all rumor still, but look, there's problems. Superman movie wasn't profitable. Peacemaker season 2, good lord. You know? And so Zaslav's looking to sell off Warner Brothers. A new regime comes in. Hey, you're not really delivering, Gunn. Bye. You know, and that's a likely scenario. So anyways, the Snyder faithful have stayed vocal online. Yeah. Criticizing the creative choices and direction of Gunn's Superman and Peacemaker projects. Well, to be fair, they criticized him before they ever saw a frame of it, so, you know. But, well, we've seen it now, so Snyder's image of Cavill posted now feels like a symbolic statement that his Superman still defines the modern era of DC heroes. Well, Man of Steel did better than Gunn's Superman. So Snyder has said before that if he ever returns to DC, it would only be to adapt The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller and Klaus Janson. The story features an older Batman and Superman facing off in a grim, deconstructed world. Yeah, he's been saying that forever. He mentioned a desire to do a film adaptation of Dark Knight Returns after he shot Watchmen. So he said, yeah, I'd really like to tackle that. I would love that to be the next film that he does, and that sort of thing. Well, it didn't happen, and so he ends up given the reins to Superman, and then ultimately a shared universe type thing. And so when he had his shot to put Batman in Batman versus Superman, he probably figured this was his only shot to at least, you know, borrow scenes from Dark Knight Returns and put it in there. Now he's been hemming and hawing about this. There was this meeting. They put out a photograph of him meeting with James Gunn in his office. And they have a history. James Gunn wrote the script to Dawn of the Dead and all that. And one wonders if there was something of that nature. Yeah, down the road when we get this thing up and running, that could be a great Elseworlds project, and Zack would come in and do his adaptation of Dark Knight Returns. So maybe that's on the table still, even if DCU falls apart. I don't know. So more than likely, that would be something that could occur. So McGloin continues, if Snyder does come back, the assumption is that he'd want to reunite Ben Affleck and Henry Cavill to play the older versions of those characters. His latest post could be teasing exactly that. A possible creative comeback if new ownership takes control of Warner Brothers Discovery and the DC brand. The Snyder faithful are also hoping that Netflix buys WBD and returns the Snyderverse. However, McGloin's insiders have told him that everybody has moved on, including Zack. It's why he only wants The Dark Knight Returns. So, yeah, a lot of time has passed. The idea that you would reunite the entire cast to finish the Justice League films that Snyder had planned grows more and more unlikely. And I suppose the scenario could be where he produces a continuation of those narratives with whatever cast members they could get back together, possibly having to recast some of them, and that sort of thing. But this would probably more of what he would like to do, and if he could get Henry and Ben to play those roles, especially, by the time you get around to shooting, they're much older than they were in the DCEU thing. And I don't know that he would even attach it to that. They would just be playing the characters to do a full-on adaptation of the book. And, I certainly, Ben Affleck has had nothing but glowing praise for Zack Snyder. He clearly really likes the man. They got along great. And that might get him back in the suit. I mean, he's been jerked around a lot over Batman. And I think after that business right at the last minute where they decided to just shift gears yet again, bring in Gunn and boot out DCEU, and he was done. Especially when they were setting up his return to Batman. And that's what this scene from The Flash that you never got to see was about. And then, never mind, Ben, we changed our mind again. And so he's like, all right, okay, well, good luck. And he was done. Henry Cavill, well, they jerked him around too, quite a bit. And had him go out and announce, yes, I'm back as Superman. We're going to do Man of Steel 2. And then, you know what, Henry, we changed our mind. Never mind. So, I mean, good Lord. And in a lot of ways, I always detected he was not entirely happy with Batman versus Superman because he said, well, it's very much a Batman movie. He wanted a Man of Steel 2. He wanted a Superman movie. It's not that he was, against playing Superman in other vehicles like that. He was fine with that. He just wanted part of the deal. He gets a Superman movie, which they should have done that. They should have done a Man of Steel 2 and set up their Batman and so on. So I've been through this a million times. It's how it should have been done. And Affleck's Batman should have been a separate film, and then you bring them together and stuff like that. But one of the things that always occurs to me is like, what if they just went ahead and did a full-on adaptation of Dark Knight Returns and then set the rest of the DCEU in the past? This is where they end up. And I don't know, you can weave in your Dark Side story and stuff, and then, because ultimately, when Frank Miller returned to the property, I didn't really care for the follow-ups to Dark Knight Returns. The only interesting thing about Dark Knight Strikes Again was the Justice League is there and some of that sort of stuff. Suppose you could, sort of weave in some of those elements into a Dark Knight Returns movie and kind of give it a better ending somewhat. I mean, Superman knows the deal at the end. I don't want to, if you haven't read the story or seen the animated version of it, I won't spoil it, but conceivably they could do it. So maybe something of that nature could occur, but as far as DCEU, I don't think so. It means I guess they'll have go find some other guy to be Superman. And that's the sad thing about this. David Cornsweet does a good Superman. I think he could be a great Superman. And I've said this in previous videos, it's almost like there's a curse here. All of the recent actors, Cornsweet, Cavill, and Brandon Routh, I thought were all really good Superman. They just didn't get great projects. Routh probably got the worst of it. Tyler Hoechlin lucked out because that Lois and Superman show was really good. So I guess of the 4 actors who have played Superman, he won out the best. But it's just always a tease of what could have been. And then, no. So I don't, maybe Man of Tomorrow can knock it out of the park and surprise everybody. And that would be great for David Cornsweet. Because, yeah, he's got the potential to do a great Superman. Will he get the opportunity? I don't know. But even so, this idea of a side project, an Elseworlds, if you will, wouldn't mind seeing that at all. It's just, for Henry himself, would be more akin to a full-on Superman movie. And Dark Knight Returns is not a Superman movie. Now, Kingdom Come could be, but Dark Knight Returns, that's a Batman movie. Superman's a big part in it, but it's still a Batman movie. So I don't know. Depending on what he's got going on, he might, but I don't know, whatever. You know, the approach is it's an iconic story within the mythos and whatnot. That story might bring him in. Possibly. But anyway, what discussions happened? You know, that's the sort of thing. And then, there's trouble with Guns DCU. And then all of a sudden, Zack Snyder says, hey, look, I took this picture of Henry as Superman. Because this is the sort of thing he would do during the whole release, the Snyder Cut stuff. All these stills he had from the film, he would post, usually on Vero, and all that. And then, well, look what happened. It finally got released. So, you know. But it could just, hey, here's an idea. Will it happen? But still. So anyway, in the midst of all this, you can't help but notice